passages of the New Testament. And it's one of these things that when you're a preacher, you say, it's all been said there, you might as well just sit down for the day, because how much more hopeful and beautiful and well thought out can you get? When I teach the Bible at school, one of the things I try to tell people is that the people who wrote these particular books had a lot of choices in the words that they were using. They could have said many, many different things, but they chose to say this, whatever it is that they wrote. And also, people had their hand in it every year, every century, every moment they could. And they changed and manipulated the words in order to make it mean what it is that they will understand. One of the things I made my students do was they had to take a gospel passage or a piece from the book of Revelation, rather, and they had to also look at what it says in a foreign language, so they could see what the person who wrote it was really intended. Because sometimes when you look at it from a foreign language, you see a word, then the person who translated it really has to understand every single part of that word in order to get it to mean something in their language. And this is exactly what the gospel writers did. They chose words, but the people who have brought it to us in English went to great lengths to try to understand every nuance of that word, so that when it comes to us, it has been highly manipulated in order to try to get it to mean exactly what the translator thought the author meant. And when you read this particular passage, you see now this is by Eugene Peterson, who has now translated or retranslated it from the English into something that he thought would be more understandable to today's folk. You understand, I think, if you know the story well, consider the lilies of the field and how they toil. They never toil nor spin, but I tell you, not Solomon, all his glory was arrayed like one of these. That's the original translation. You didn't see Solomon mentioned here. Eugene Peterson tried to take the gospel and put it into words that he thought would resonate with today's hearers. I think he does a really, really good job. The only thing he didn't bring in this particular translation was shopping at the mall. That would have been, I think, yeah, that would have been a good line in there, No amount of shopping at the mall is going to make you look any prettier, dear. God has given you everything you need in God's own shopping mall. And that's sort of the tenor of it, I would say. Yeah.
Well, when you were reading, I was thinking, wow, people really were that concerned over their clothes then? So, is that were people really concerned over their clothes then?
I think that one of the things he was responding to was, I don't know, do you remember growing up in the church and going to church, and it was like no woman would ever wear pants to church? I can remember that was a big deal if you wore pants to church. I can remember it was a big deal when I was in, I guess it was maybe 7th grade or 8th grade, and kids wanted to wear jeans to church, and they were actually turned away, and so they couldn't come in church if they had jeans on. And I remember the minister at my church at that time saying, God does not care what you're wearing. God cares that you're here. Come in. But to this day, I mean, you can't go into the Vatican if you're wearing short sleeves. You have to have long sleeves. To this day, you can't go into that. I don't know if you can still go without a hat, women. You still have to have a hat, I think. You don't? You don't know. But because I can remember being there, you have to have your head covered, because I can remember being there and watching tourists put Kleenexes on their heads, even dirty Kleenexes. It was just, ridiculous in order to get in the door, because you weren't supposed to, women were not supposed to go in without their head covered. And so to answer your question, Robin, I would say that people have always been concerned about how it is that they are present to one another, but also particularly concerned about how they are present towards God. And Jesus had taken a lot of guff from the people around him about how it was that his disciples were comporting themselves. And so he uses it as an opportunity to talk about comportment all in all. Because the Pharisees and Sadducees were very concerned about whether you washed your hands before the meal, and if you did everything right. It was more important that you do things right than you do things well. It was more important that you did what's right than to actually help somebody. Because if it was, for instance, the story of the Good Samaritan, you know, the Samaritan is in the ditch, and nobody would help him out of the ditch because it was a Sabbath. It wasn't the Good Samaritan was the Sabbath, it was a man who was in the ditch, and the Good Samaritan comes along and helps him out. And they criticize the Samaritans for having done so, you know, because he did it on the holy day. And Jesus is not talking about the particular thing. He said, now come on, which one of you, if your donkey fell in the ditch on the Sabbath, wouldn't pull it out? But here it is, you won't help a man up out of the ditch because it's a Sabbath. You help your own donkey. And there are many commentaries have been about that, about who was the greater donkey when it comes to the whole story. So I would say, yes, people were concerned about it, but it's a metaphor also for all the things that people get concerned about that they really should not spend their time being concerned about. But, you know, anybody that grows up with a teenager in their house knows how important looks are. And the hours spent in front of the mirror. And I mean, if you also think about, can you remember as a child that one pimple that was going to ruin your life? I mean, you couldn't go to the dance, you know, couldn't go out the door, or your hair looked bad, you know, and bad hair day. I mean, people have been having bad hair days for a long time. And so Jesus is talking about, let's not worry about the bad hair days. There are greater things to really worry about. So what does he say that really one should worry about? It says it here. What should one really worry about?
I stopped worrying about that hair day.
I know you stopped worrying about that. But now it's just face up there.
Yeah. But you know, I wanted to comment on the dressing thing. When I was yesterday, I happened to be driving by Young Israel, the Orthodox community here, and every Saturday, rain or shine, they're dressed to the nines, and even because it's considered work to open up an umbrella on the Sabbath, they'll walk through the pouring rain in all their finery. And my office mate, who's a member there, I said to him once, I said, well, if you have a forecast a day or two before, can't you cheat a little bit and have the umbrella open beforehand?
But you couldn't carry it. You could carry it would be work.
Yeah, but the person I was with said to me, it's interesting how they've been able to maintain that dress code when, you know, Catholic churches, Protestant churches, it's like almost anything goes, and you know, we did this house in this beach community, and people are barely dressed when they show up. So I kind of look at it one way, well, they're showing up. You know, that's more important than whether or not they're, you know, been outfitted by Barbies.
Yeah, I think, you know, the one reason that many people do get dressed up for church, has to do with the whole idea of respect for the place and moment. I mean, if you went to Bethesda Baptist today, you wouldn't see any lady there without a hat on. I can assure you, even today, hats are quite the thing. You know, at Bethesda, still, you would not go into, that's a Protestant church, but you would not go in there without a hat on. If you were one of the ladies there. And even the gentlemen wear hats there and they take them off as they come in the door. Why is it that ladies have to wear hats when they come in and gentlemen have to take them off? I don't, you know, I have to think that one through. But it's
supposed to cover your head and show a sign of respect.
Yeah.
And then take it up.
Yeah, well, don't women bow to God? No, see, that's the thing, because women don't bow to God. Exactly. That's,
Also, there's a book called Church Ladies' Hats.
That's
That's very hard to do with church and showing respect. It's how they can outdo each other with their hats.
well, hats, you know, again, hats are a metaphor. All of it is a metaphor for how it is in the relationship that we have with God and what's really, really important. That's what it's trying to get down to. And I love the idea that, if you go out and you look at the wildflowers and see what a beautiful picture God has painted, or the universe has painted of itself, and that we're worrying about, the parking ticket. It can ruin our week, it can ruin our day, it can ruin our year, and we're worried about that, or we're worried about, whether we got the invitation or not, and it can really make our life miserable. What is really, really important? I think that's one of the things that Matthew was really trying to get down to, and I think that's one of the things that Jesus really did well, or the betrayal of Jesus in the Gospels did very, very well. He tried to cut out all the red tape and tried to get to people and say, what's really important to you? Tell me what's really important to you. What would you say is the most important thing to you, if you had to think that through? Of all your life, of all the things that happen, what is the most important thing to you? Because when you know the answer to that, that really can help you define your life. When people are doing counseling, or when they're doing any type of talking and trying to help people live their lives, one of the good questions, which most people can't answer if they think about it, and they really want to, because you don't get to change your mind when you do it. You get to have one thing. This is one chance. It's like, the story of the two men on the desert island, and they find a bottle, and the one opens it up, and a genie comes out, and he said, I'm going to give either one of you anything that you want. The first guy said, me first. I know exactly what I want. I have been on this desert island with this guy for 45 years. I want wine, women, and salt. Before he'd even finished the words, he was gone. So, comes over to the next guy, and Jesus says, okay, what do you want? He looks around and goes, bring him back. You have to really think about what's important to you in order to answer the question. You only get one chance. So, what would you say, anybody, what is the most important thing to you more than anything else? Corinne?
My family.
Your family.
An event or a thing?
It could be anything. I mean, some people see their lives in events. Some people see their lives in what they're wearing. Some people see their lives in what they don't have. Some people see their lives according to what they have. People see their lives according to what they wish they had. Some people see their lives according to where they think they're going. Some people see their lives, especially as you get older, perhaps, where you've been. What's the most important thing to you? Your family.
I help support you.
You help them. Well,
Their
okay.
well-being, and I hope they will do well and have their lives and lead their lives.
Yeah. Kathy,
Oh, my relationship with God.
your relationship with God. Yeah, Monkey. What's the most important thing to you? I better sit down for this. Coffee hour, I know.
Well, I said nothing about coming.
Oh, okay,
Have
good.
a faith.
Having faith. Okay. What else? Yeah. What's the most important thing to you?
Coming out process.
The coming out process.
Love.
Love.
Love. I was just having a life.
Being alive. You mean versus the other parts where you were dead?
Almost there.
I'm almost dead. There's the possibility that let's just keep going.
I was going to say to have a curious mind and be able to satisfy that by finding answers.
Alexander, what's the most important thing to you at 14 going on 15? What would you say? 15 going on 16. What defines your life?
So it must be a car if it's 15 going on 16.
You never know. Friends and family? Because, there's some people that would, just give their right arm to be with their friends, at the moment. And the nice thing you have to remember, Alexander, too, is that you can choose your friends, but you can't choose your family. Keep that in mind as you get older. That will be very important. So, that's just a little hint from my life.
That's not all of you, right?
What's the most important thing to you?
I'd like to make it broad, if I may. And I think of how I've been hungry at various times, and I've had an opportunity to help to feed. And it's awful not to have food, to be hungry. That would be my wish, that I could do something toward feeding the hungry in the world. It's awful to be hungry.
Well, one of the things that, as I said, that Jesus tried to do, or the gospel writers tried to do, and I think the reason that Christianity took off in the way that it did in the early years, was because it offered people something that they felt that they didn't have otherwise. If that were not true, it would never have made it. If they had to do something that was different than what was already there. And, of course, one of the things I think that Christianity was able to offer was the idea of unbridled possibilities. Anything is possible. Again, it's the idea that in Christ all things are possible. That was not a message that was being preached at the time by anybody else. You were always, you have to conform. It was conformity that was important in those days. In Rome, under Roman rule, in Jerusalem, wherever that was taking place, the whole idea was conformity. That was what life was about. Conformity to rules, conformity to God, conformity to the way things, everybody knew what things were to be done and what was expected of them. Jesus came, or the message of Jesus comes, and turns that all upside down and says, that's not what's important. What really is important is perhaps one's relationship with God, but through that relationship, the understanding that all things are possible. So all the things that you thought were not possible, to be free, to be in right relationship with the world, to have family and friends who are not encumbered also by the things that the Romans and religious authorities put down on everybody else. That all those things were now new possibilities. Anything could happen, and that made it very, very, very attractive to people. It gave them hope, but I think more than that, it gave them opportunity, which is something that was sorely lacking in the first century. Most people in the first century had very few opportunities, because it was a very, especially in this area here, because it was very, very highly controlled and manipulated by an oppressive government. And if you think about it, the country of Myanmar would not let people come in and help all those people that were killed by the storm. China, with all those people that died, did not even want to send people there to those villages to acknowledge, because they didn't even want to acknowledge that there was weakness. And so the fact that 21,000 people died, that's part of the price of life. You know, that's part of the price of having the government. 80, yeah. Wow, I mean 80,000 people. Just amazing. Amazing. New Orleans too, yeah. And nobody wants to think about it. Nobody wants to admit to the possibility of failure, or that there is, you know, if less people, not a bad thing. If you want to know my take on treatment and all that, since you asked, if you want to know my take on that, and the reason that we did not respond the way we should is because George Bush and the people around him, because of their biblical beliefs, which is that they think that they are helping to bring about the end of the world, as I've told you about before, that the whole idea that all those people died was okay because that brings us closer to the end time. And George and the people around him, and even the people that were around his father, like James Watt and other people like that, they really feel that they are ushering in the end time. So you don't worry about those people died. That's a sign, you see, that the time is near. and he will be the great herald of it. That's one of the things he sincerely, I'm not making this up, he sincerely believes. And he believes it because he is a student of the book of Revelation. And in the book of Revelation, there are all these signs, and he sees them. I've told you before, he has Bible study every single morning. Condi plays the piano, they sing hymns, and he prays. Every morning. You're required to be there if you're in his inner circle. And his favorite book, if you ask him, he's quoted this 100 times, is the book of Revelation. And so if you want to know why certain things are the way they are, that's in the United States, that's true. But I'm not saying that it's any better anywhere else. Myanmar is a terrible example of that. Also, I would say that China is a terrible example, but we can go on and on. I mean, why is it that we know what's happening in Myanmar, but we have no idea of the millions of people that have been killed in the Sudan, or Ethiopia, or Darfur, and any of those places like that, because they're not on our radar. Did you know, this is something that I didn't know until this past week, because I was at a meeting about what's happening in the Anglican Church worldwide. The Bishop of Sudan was visiting. Do you know that? How big do you think the country Sudan is? Just about how big? You can't answer because you're from there, so you're in that area. You know,
Geographically?
Geographically. How huge would you say it is? Compared to the United States, how big is it? You know? No.
California order.
The country Sudan is bigger than the entire Louisiana Purchase.
Wow.
That's almost one half the country. Almost one half. But you look at it on the map, because of our Western maps, which make Africa about this big, and the United States this big. But in reality, the Sudan is almost as big as the United States. Half of it. And the reason I bring this up is because the Bishop of Sudan has asked Bishop Sis to aid him because he's just been elected, and there are very few roads in Sudan that are paved. And he had asked the bishop if the bishop would help him raise some money to buy a motorcycle so that he could visit the various places he has to go to. That's the only way he can get there. I don't know. I'm sure he has. I mean, but I just thought about, you think about the enormity of that. And why do I bring that up? Well, I bring it up because we have a vision that is very skewed of the whole world in many ways. And until you travel, and I say this is one of the things that I think you were even hinting at, Vicki, when you were saying, the ability to travel and to see how other people live and think changes your life. And it opens new doors to the way of thinking. And this is one of the things one of the reasons that Jesus sent the people out who were with him. This is another thing that Jesus did that was unlike anything that anybody else was doing during the day, was that Jesus was not interested in concentrating power in one person, i.e. himself or even God. Jesus gave the authority and sent other people out with it and said, change the world. You can. I think that's where the present day church does its poorest job.
I agree with you. We should be doing a great deal more than we are.
Yeah.
Teleconferencing from this church to a church, let's say, in Africa. We could do that.
We're doing it right now, actually, Vicki. Frank posts this on the internet. Do you know people see this worldwide?
Yep, that's so exciting. They don't know how to get it in Connecticut.
They don't know what.
How to get it in Connecticut. We can give them the link.
Wait, Rusty, what was the bishop's response to that request?
He said he'd be glad to help raise money for it.
How much does this guy need?
Huh?
How much do you need for a motorcycle?
Probably about $10,000.
Immediate.
No, he can travel on the dirt roads and the motorcycle. But then once the bishop agreed to that, he said, and the bishop of Sudan said, but a Land Rover would be nicer. And so I think some other people are going to try. Actually, he needs both, because there's some places that a Land Rover cannot go in some of the hill towns and everything where he's going to go. But I thought, this was we were at a discussion talking about land and talking about the whole issue of sexuality. And the Bishop of Sudan said, my brothers and sisters, don't get me wrong. I am concerned about your pain over sexuality being not admitted to the church. I really am. He says, but I have 23 million people of my parishioners who are dying of AIDS. And when I hear the pettiness that goes on between squabbling bishops over, or clergy over who should come and sit at the table, I'm saying I don't even have a table to sit at, and I'm looking at the people that are under the table and dying. Let's try to put our priorities straight. I'm not diminishing your pain and saying that you do not have it. I'm trying to tell you that not everybody shares the same pain. So it's not that I am disinterested as to whether or not you have pain. I want to have the opportunity to share with you mine and tell you that we all have priorities. And that's why I asked you, what is the most important thing to you? Because the other thing about that, and I think that you know this, is that it can change. It can change in a heartbeat. It can change based upon what's happening to you at the moment. Not everybody has the ability or even the luxury of keeping what is most important to them in front of them. In fact, we are often distracted from where we really need to be or want to be. There are lots of things that get in the way. That's what I call sin. My understanding of sin is what gets in the way of our relationship with God, in our relationship with the universe, in our relationship with self. It's what keeps us from getting in. And I think, as I told you before, in Japanese, there is no word for sin. It doesn't exist in the Japanese mindset. I find that really interesting. So that might tell you a little bit about how it is or why they operate and do the things they do as a culture. Because there is no concept of that. We come from a sin understanding, even ruling culture.
No, I just think that that's my frustration with all organized religion is there's this poor man who doesn't have a motorcycle or a car in Africa, and yet we have big churches and big salaries and all this kind of money that is spent on the authority of the church, and there are people who are starving to death. Why?
I would say that before I looked at the church, I looked at government and say, because government has more. I mean, I think back to, 7 years ago.
Yeah, but they're tax-free.
Huh?
They're tax-free.
Not all,
the
but
church
yeah.
is tax-free.
Still, even if you
We're
did
paying
that,
our taxes.
even
to
if
the
you did
government.
that, even if you took that into consideration, I think that I mean, do you know how much aid we send to Myanmar? How much aid did we send to
Episcopal
Myanmar?
Church?
No, the United States.
How much did the Episcopal Church send?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I haven't looked.
I mean, I think the church should pay taxes.
But
Should pay taxes.
but how much money did the United States government send to Myanmar? Anybody know?
I think it was 300 million.
No.
More than the
$250,000. That was it. That was it.
No, I think
$250,000.
I think I'm wrong.
No, I'm not. Myanmar. That is what we sent.
Because they said
200.
generous.
Right. Because they said people were taking the money over there, which they did, probably. But that's all we sent. $250,000. Now, come on. Before I'm going to look at the church, I bet you that our church, just the Episcopal Church, I bet you we have sent more relief money than that. I bet you. I bet you.
But as much as I dislike Bush, I'm sure I heard him pledge, because I remember thinking this at the time, I'm sure I heard him said the United States was going to, he was going to ask Congress, we made a pledge to send $300 million. And I remember I had two thoughts immediately. One, so there we go, another $300 million from China to send that money. And secondly,
This is China.
No, Rusty, I'm saying where we were going to get that money, the same place that the United States is getting money to send people $600 stimulation checks.
Our response to China was $300 million. our response to Myanmar was $250,000.
Okay, maybe that was it. Yeah, but I think the point too that Robin made about the problem with Myanmar is that is the money going to get to?
We could say that about anything. The whole idea, though, the reason you even got to this discussion was because I think there's a lot more that can be done, and there's no doubt about it. But I just want to say that whenever we are trying to examine our lives, that we have to think about priorities. There are priorities that are made, and everything that we read, everything that we see, has all been prioritized. I mean, it's one of the things that one has to really stop, pull back, and look at if one is going to have any examination about life and a relationship with God. I think that in our relationship with God, there are priorities. And it's interesting to see how it is that where people put those down.
When I go to Catholic social justice conferences as the, in my official capacity, there's a contingent of which I am one where we sit around and say the social message of Catholicism, of preference to the poor, and that our priority should be in those social justice issues is often, and most of the time, completely obscured and shadowed by what the church chooses to make their main issues publicly, which are issues of individual morality regarding women, abortions, and sexuality. And in fact, I think the church is the one that's prioritizing and making this a social justice message really hard for anybody here and losing a very powerful position that they could have in the social world. It seems to me the same thing with the church when it's not an either or. The guy from Africa is saying, I hear your pain. So let's put that down as a priority. Let's get out of that where we're focusing on these kinds of what really now in terms of the global scale, trivial issues. Of course, it wouldn't be, because if they were overcome, it would make the world move toward a more just world, and you could solve those social problems far easier.
Yeah, and I think it's a one-on-one that makes a big difference. What happened was that then there was an opportunity at this clergy conference for a whole bunch of gay clergy to meet with the bishop from Sudan. Because he's been very, very opposed to that would allow gay persons to be ordained worldwide. And after that, they talked, and they went out to dinner together, and the bishop said, I came here not feeling very, very hopeful about having any conversation with you. I didn't think you would even want to meet with me because of my position. He said, you have forced me, based upon your generosity and your attention and your hearing my pain, you have forced me to reconsider my position. And that's where it takes. This is a thing that I think that Christianity did very well in the early days also. It went one-on-one. It sat down. Jesus sat down with people one-on-one. Not trying to change the whole system from the top, but trying to change it from the bottom, going one at a time. One of the things that we say in our liturgy later on at the Eucharist is that there are many ways to go about our Christian lives. What we try to do is consider each flame as important as another, and trying one by one to keep it lit. So I want to encourage you to think in the priorities for this weekend and all the things that this weekend means and so forth, the time we have to let the mind run down a little bit, to consider just what it's like one-on-one to greet one another and carry on the relationship of God through meeting one-on-one, by just reaching across the aisle, by being with people, by talking to them, by walking with them, by saying, I hear you and you're important to me. By showing that. You don't even have to say it. You can just be it. Be it to another person. And that really will change the world. It really will. One-on-one. I think this is, again, where a lot of people miss the whole thing. You can't change the whole system from the top, ever. I think it always has to be a grassroots thing, and it's just a little bit at a time that it starts to fall in line when one realizes that the person you're sitting next to right now is the most important way to change the world by greeting them and caring for them. Right now, that's the most important way to do it, and the easiest way. It's never hard. It's just a matter of opening up one's hand.
The church seems to have lost sight of what was going on in the first century with Jesus. For example, we speak of family values as a church oriented. If you read the Gospels, you find out Jesus' comment on family values was quite striking and quite shocking. He that does not hate his mother and his father, his brother and his sister, cannot be my disciple. Who are my brothers and sisters? These people who listen to me, not the family that I come from. All of that gets pushed under. When we get rid of Jesus and substitute with Christ, that's when we lose sight of all of that. You asked the question before that was most important, because the words should have been, what is your ultimate concern? And the question should be not what is your ultimate concern, but what should be the ultimate concern of us human beings, to take care of one another, to take care of ourselves. That's the shoulds and the oughts. The universe doesn't give us that. It gives us very cold laws by which we must live, and we have no choice. You fall over poverty, you die. It's the end of that. But with respect to the shoulds and the oughts, this is something people must put into place. And I agree wholeheartedly with your one-on-one, because that's the way Jesus did. He sat down at the table and he talked with you. He crashed parties. And he commented in Thomas was, he actually got there and the woman asked him, what are you doing? You climbed on my couch here as if you belong here. What's going on? So he crashed parties, but he got listened to. And that's what we much more sight of that. I'm very sad by that.
Yeah. I think we can put that on the sign. Jesus was a party crasher.
Yes.
Jesus was a party crasher, and it changed the world.
You can take from one party at a time.
One party at a time. Amen. That's what we're a party church. That's what we say. All right. Well, there you have it. I say whatever it takes. But I would say, I agree with you, Ray, in your assessment. And one of the things I learned, like in dealing with the homeless issue, I used to be very involved in the homeless issue. And one of the big things always was we would come together and people say, well, this is such a massive thing. How can we make a difference? And I used to say one homeless person at a time. My goodness. And that was one of the things that O'Rourke at the time, who was the executive, just could not get. He would say, where are they? I said, oh, those are the people you stepped over coming to the building this morning. You didn't even see them. I'm serious. He had no idea. And then it got down to numbers. How many? Well, we have to know how many there are. And we had a coalition of food pantries and soup kitchens and homeless shelters that we had formed called Coalition for the Homeless in Westchester, which I was president. And the big thing was we were all got into, and I know this is one thing to just drive you crazy, we all got into reporting. We had to report back to the government how many homeless people, we had to count. And people would come to the meetings and say, oh, I have to hand in this report, and I wasn't keeping in count. I said, make up a number. They said, we can't do that. I said, make up a number. Whatever number you make up, it will not even be close to the reality. It won't. People saying, well, I think in Austin there's probably like 236 homeless people. I said in Austin there are 10,000 homeless people. Number one in the county, 10,000. Because you have to consider what homeless means. Homeless is just not the people who don't have a home because they lost their job and they're on the street. There's also people that are living with family members because they got burned out of their houses, or because they lost their job, or whatever. You put all that together, Austin is the number one town or community in this county that has the most social services more than any other community, because of the prison and everything else that is going on there. And they also, because of that, have the highest indigent population. And people just didn't even have any idea. And so we would come to these meetings and they say, well, should I put down 230,000? I said, put down 20,000. Let them call you and prove you wrong. Let them do it. So, well, we won't get any money. I said, yeah, but you'll get a lot of attention, I can tell you that. And that's where the money will come. So all that to say for this morning, I hope that when we're trying to look at what's most important to us in life, that we keep in mind that as we try to approach those big ticket items, family and all this sort of things, even with family members, it happens one conversation at a time. And those things really, really change one's life, change the world, makes a difference. And you have a Memorial Weekend that brings good memories.